And we conclude tonight with John Grubb, who's with the Bay Area Council, and pleased to have you with us. Should be congratulated. Rarely does the Bay Area Council get to go out there and mobilize public opinion, and you did that, and you got to me, and I participated. Why don't you describe this victory, which is significant?
Sure. I'd start with the top problem that we have here in the Bay Area when we ask residents, we do a poll every year, is transportation. And it's no surprise because we have the second worst traffic in the entire United States. Number one is LA and number two is the Bay Area.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and the people of the Bay Area should be really proud though because we've transformed that frustration. It's not just a polling result, they've made it into action. And so 7 of the 9 counties of the Bay Area have passed transportation sales tax measures to fund projects. They said if the state isn't going to fund it and the federal government isn't going to fund it, we'll do it ourselves. Well, then last November, voters, in large part driven by Bay Area voters, passed one of the largest infrastructure bond packages.
At the state level?
At the state level in California history. And about 2 weeks ago, we saw the fruit of those votes come here to the Bay Area big time. And what you're referring to is that the California Transportation Commission gave out the highway funds for across the state. And at first blush, the Bay Area was only scheduled to get about $686 million, which was far too low. It wasn't. It was about 25% of what was going to go to all of Northern California. So a lot of the rest of that money was going to go to rural areas, which may have problems, but nothing. A 2-lane freeway through the redwoods doesn't compare to 80 or 880 or 101 here in the Bay Area. And so we were able to mobilize, thanks in part to your help and a lot of elected leaders.
Who sent the email that you told me to send.
Yeah, and the squeaky wheel got the grease big time, and we transformed $686 million to $1.7 billion.
And I think that's terrific, and for this reason. The Bay Area Council is one of several regional organizations that tries to get the 80 or so cities in the Bay Area to think like a region, which is hard with a bay in the middle of it. And the Bay Area Council, as I've remembered it, did a lot of studies, did a lot of polls, has their annual convention, dinner, and people come together. Very powerful organization, the biggest corporations. But this seems like the first time you actually were able to accomplish something very significant. Maybe there's been others. Maybe forming BCDC or helping to form BCDC, which I was a commissioner on, is important. But isn't this the first time you've actually mobilized the community?
It's been definitely one of our biggest successes in recent time. Historically, we did help form BART. We conceptualized it, wrote the legislation, and then funded it, and have funded all of its extensions. But in recent times, winning $1 billion is a huge accomplishment for us, and we're very proud of it.
Do you get wrapped up in some of the politics that we have in San Francisco between those who believe in cars and those who don't? It's very emotional in San Francisco, where it comes down to where you spend the money. And we saw this on the Bay Bridge and the Richmond Bridge. There are now going to be bike lanes. They fought hard for them, and I give the Bike Coalition credit. Do you wind up, as the Bay Area Council, getting involved in that dispute?
Generally, we try and stay in a regional focused way. But San Francisco has a special responsibility to the rest of the Bay Area because the Bay Area has collectively agreed to invest billions of dollars in infrastructure that comes here into San Francisco. There's more people in San Francisco during the daytime than there are in the nighttime. People are coming here to work. And so they need to have the ability to both drive here if they can't take public transit, or to take public transit also if they can. So San Francisco needs to help provide the infrastructure, roads and freeways, so that everyone can get here and get to their job.
That same question would come between public transit versus cars. How do you and how does your organization and the members of your organization resolve that situation? I mean, the case could be made for one or the other.
Well, it needs to be a mix of both, of course. There's no way to do away with the car today, but we're advocates of both carpool lanes to better use the infrastructure that we have, as well as public transportation. We really aren't all for one or the other.
You're also very much concentrating on ferries.
Yeah. So the Bay Area has a 62% chance of a major earthquake in the next 25 years. FEMA estimated that the 3 biggest catastrophes that would happen in the United States were a terrorist attack in New York, a hurricane in New Orleans, and an earthquake in San Francisco. 2 of those 3 have already struck. We think the Bay Area has to get prepared. And what we've seen is that in the past, when earthquakes happened here in the Bay Area, it was the water that remains, and flotillas of boats go out to rescue people. We want to see that be a coordinated type of action. And so we're proposing a ferry system of about 88 boats and 33 terminals, a massive new system that could respond after an earthquake or other major disaster.
But it's also in place for daily use.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
How many?
The drive for this is the earthquake, but traffic is the #1 problem here in the Bay Area, so this also works for that.
How many boats are there now, and how many terminals do you think roughly? Is it half of that,
There's
a quarter of that?
Probably about 6 or 7 major terminals here in the Bay Area, and boats maybe around 20 or so.
And
so this would be we'd have one of the biggest ferry infrastructures in the entire country.
Where would you put 80 terminals?
Or world, actually.
Where would you put 80 terminals? I mean, if there's
30 terminals.
30.
Now, some of them would be temporary, but a lot of them are already places such as Port Sonoma in the North Bay, Alviso down by San Jose, Redwood City, a bunch of places in Alameda.
That don't exist right now, but you'd like to see.
Yeah, and these communities really want a ferry to come in. They want access to be able to get from the shoreline that they're staring at every day to somewhere else across the bay.
And who will build the boats, and who will operate them, and who will finance them?
That remains to be seen. There's money potentially in the infrastructure bonds to finance this. In terms of operating costs, we're still going to need to work that out.
Do you think it's a viable commercial enterprise? In other words, one where entrepreneurs could and businesses could get involved and make a profit, or is it necessarily?
It would be a public transit system,
but
and by nature, almost all public transit is societal benefit, so society gives some funding to it. In other words, you don't get 100% fare box revenue to fund the system. So there will need to be some other sources of income.
Okay,
for it.
now tell me about the region. We were talking. The region was in trouble when the computer world collapsed. We'll call it 1.0 or whatever, or maybe it was empty. There was nothing there. At that time, there was nothing in a lot of those companies. But now we're moving into another era of prosperity.
Right.
The East Bay. People don't realize the East Bay wasn't really affected by what happened in the downturn. It's a very strong sub-economy, the entire East Bay. Yeah,
that's right. Now, in the dot-com bust, we lost about 425,000 jobs, which to put in perspective is more than the entire working population of San Francisco. A huge hit. The East Bay weathered it very well because they have a diverse economy. And as a matter of fact, they've driven the recovery in large part that the Bay Area has experienced over the past 3 years. Now Silicon Valley is starting to pick up Santa Clara County because of Web 2.0 and is actually starting to replace Alameda. But that's part of the beauty of the Bay Area as an economic unit, is that we can rely on the diversity of our different regions to pull us through really hard times.
Do you think the biotechnology of South San Francisco and a bit of San Francisco, Emeryville, is that a significant, is that just razzle-dazzle right now, or is that a significant industry in the future?
It's a very important industry for the Bay Area because of the research that's going to come from the universities. We have a sort of ecosystem of companies here where the universities spin off ideas and people to work on them. The venture capital companies fund the ideas that come out of there. And then also the people that come from those universities work on them, and then they become big companies here.
Okay.
And so it's important about biotech companies because they're high-paying jobs. And they are a big part of our economy, and they're going to get bigger. I mean, we're just at the beginning stages for a lot of these companies.
2 questions there then. The first one is, well, they are high-priced jobs, absolutely. That doesn't do a lot for a lot of the kids that are coming out of schools that don't have degrees in biochemistry and so on. Is there a danger that we're not going to be able to produce the kinds of jobs that handle a whole group of people that can't get science degrees?
Sure.
Or are you positive?
I mean, every one job, let's say, in biotechnology can create a whole bunch of other support jobs that would exist
Let's
out
hope
there.
So, yeah.
Using that word support
right.
with quotation marks around it.
Multiplier,
but there's certainly a danger of losing the middle class here in the Bay Area.
Oh, that's not just, we hear that in San Francisco. You see that also for the Bay Area?
It's throughout the whole Bay Area, that's right, which is driven primarily by housing prices. People can't afford to live here, and so they go to other regions where they can get those kind of jobs, where a blue-collar job can easily pay for a house in most parts of the country. It's very difficult here in the Bay Area, as you well know.
Well, that's the problem of affordable housing. Then that becomes a problem of transportation, because then people used to, and I think they're still commuting out of the Central Valley where there's less expensive housing. There's no solution there, is there? Does the Bay Area Council or any other regional
the solution that we're working on, which
Yep.
is hopefully will be partially funded by the infrastructure bonds. There's a housing segment that exists.
Well, how significant is that?
It's about $2 billion.
And what would you do with that when each house costs $1 million, $800?
Well, it's not to build housing, but to help drive the policy changes or funding to be able to make these policy changes here in the Bay Area.
And what does that mean?
A lot of cities can't pay for planning anymore or pay for environmental reviews. And so they have a system of let's just do what we've been doing. That's all they can really afford to do. So the infrastructure bond money would help pay for new planners at the city level.
Would that make a difference?
And what you get from
Yeah,
there is
yeah.
you can change the type of housing that you're going to have, from a sprawling footprint here in the Bay Area to more of an urbanized growth, where you have what's called infill housing that takes advantage of our existing infrastructure, protects the farms and the suburbs from more development.
Thing is, and we had a lot of hope for that. Infill means the within, especially around transit hubs and so on, higher, denser. But then when you look at some of the housing that we're building, like on King Street in South, near in Soma, around the train station, there's a perfect example of infill, high-rise, clustered, and so on, and yet they're going for $800,000 to $1 million in average. Will we see that out in Contra Costa County? Will we see that out in Antioch? Will they build high-rises there? Will they get into cluster infill?
Yeah, we are seeing on the early fruits of the labor on that, not just in San Francisco, but in San Jose, as well as around BART stations throughout the East Bay.
Is the price coming down?
Generally, they are well balanced in terms of income levels that can stay there. Now, in San Francisco, there have been some what developers would certainly call onerous requirements on affordable housing. And so what happens is you squeeze out the middle class, and so you just have some affordable units, and then you have a lot of expensive units to help pay for those affordable units.
But can this substitute for families? I mean, often these infill high-density projects are great for couples or single people or older people who are retired. If you can't keep the families here,
right.
What
you're doing is you're taking pressure off the whole system. There's a housing crisis at all income levels here in the Bay Area. And so if you build that kind of housing in San Francisco, those people wouldn't necessarily move to somewhere else, and then a middle income family could move to that spot.
And the Bay Area Council is in the middle of this initiative.
Yeah, we've been fighting hard on it through our soapbox, as well as trying to pass laws through Sacramento and
in 1 minute, so you've had a great success in transportation, getting funds for the Bay Area, both for public transit and you're working on the affordable housing initiative. What do you think are the next 3 big issues you're all working on and you think can have positive effect on? We only got a few seconds.
Yeah, sure. Global warming is probably one of the biggest ones, and we're working with all of our companies to share solutions to that. We're one of the first supporters of the greenhouse gas bill that passed last year. Another one is globalization, and we want to make sure that there's real free trade happening. We did a poll on that. Bay Area residents want their federal elected officials to open up trade rather than constrict it for our economy. And the other one is education, of course. And there's the need there is so huge that we have a lot of work to do.
And you're taking concrete steps.
We are taking concrete steps without the time
Grubb,
to explain it. Yeah.
I congratulate you on that big win. Keep up the good work.
Thanks very much, Art.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time. Visit our website at www.sfunscripted.com.